We're proud to welcome you to the Exceptional Advisor podcast series, brought to you by the Investments and Wealth Institute. How might you go about holding better meetings with your team, with your boss, with your clients and prospects? Well, here to shed some light on that is Dr. Steven Rogelberg, who holds the title of Chancellor's Professor at UNC Charlotte and is the author of The Surprising Science of Meetings, which offers proven practices and techniques that help managers and employees enhance the quality of their meetings. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Rogelberg.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. Now, for the benefit of our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your work, do you mind giving us a brief overview?
Sure. So I'm this crazy academic that for the last 20 years has been studying meetings. And I've published actively in this space. And it's been super well received. And the nice thing about this research is that not only is it very relevant for the scientific community, but it's just so relevant for people on the front line running meetings. So been active in scholarship, and it led to some publications in Harvard Business Review, as well as my book, The Surprising Science of Meetings, which to my complete surprise and delight went viral. And so it's been fun to talk to lots of audiences about making meetings better and perhaps even charting a new future of work where meetings could be competitive advantage.
Right. So let's talk about the book. There are a number of key ideas in the book, some of them being, I think, that meetings are expensive, time-consuming, and not so enjoyable. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, meetings are a fascinating activity in that they absolutely can be costed, right? We know the cost of a meeting based on time and salaries. We also know, based on the research, that around 50% of time in meetings is not well used or effective. So we can then say, okay, well, this is how much money we're hemorrhaging due to non-optimal meetings. But in many regards, that's an underestimate, right? That doesn't take into consideration opportunity costs, things that you could be doing otherwise. It doesn't take into consideration frustration, fatigue, and even disengagement. In fact, bad meetings actually can lead to an employee leaving an organization.
That's a bit distressing. So given all that, what can folks do to make their meetings better, more effective, cost efficient, et cetera?
Well, I mean, obviously, the answer I have to give as a book author is, quickly buy the book, because the book has good science-based approaches for making meetings truly work. But let me share a few tips with your audience as well. There's so many places of intervention that can make meetings better. From thinking more carefully about whether you truly need a meeting, keeping your meetings short as possible, especially given something called Parkinson's Law, which is the idea that work expands to fill whatever time is allotted to it. So if we schedule a meeting for an hour, it's going to take an hour, but we can use this to our advantage as well, right? We can schedule meetings for 25 minutes and we'll get it done. Also thinking more carefully about agendas. So in my book, the chapter is Agendas Are a Hollow Crutch, because what's interesting is having an agenda in and of itself actually does not lead to meeting effectiveness. And when you reflect, that's not a surprise. Most agendas, or many agendas, have recycled content. What matters more than just having a piece of paper with a set of topics on it is what those topics actually are. Did you solicit input from others? And what matters even more is how you facilitate it. And good facilitation is absolutely key. If the leader's doing the majority of the talking, that's problematic. And then I'll say one last thing, because I kind of slammed agendas. So let me give a rebuild on agendas that also promotes meeting effectiveness. And that is, instead of constructing your agendas as a set of topics to be discussed, consider structuring your agenda as a set of questions to be answered. This is a very different task, right? This really forces the meeting leader to think carefully about why they're actually meeting and what they hope to accomplish. By framing agendas as questions, you have a better idea of who really has to be there, right? You don't have to over-invite as readily. You invite people who are relevant to the questions. You know if the meeting has been successful and when to end the meeting. The questions have been answered. And Robert, if you just can't think of any questions, what does that mean?
Meeting's over.
You don't need a meeting. Exactly.
Great. In your book, you also talk about having no more than 7 people in a meeting. That's probably contrary to what most people have experienced in their work life.
It all comes down to what the purpose is. If it's a bunch of one-way communication, then you can have a heck of a lot more than 7. But if you're really looking for a conversation, a true discussion, most people have a hard time facilitating conversations once you start passing 6, 7 people. Now, if you're really highly skilled at facilitation, you could probably go to 10 people, maybe inch a little higher, but in general, leaders just don't know how to truly facilitate, and there's just not enough airtime in many regards to even succeed with so many people. So if you're really looking for genuine conversation that involves everyone, that's where we have to think very carefully about meeting size.
Right. Another concept in the book that you talk about is dispelling negative energy. Talk more about that.
Yeah. What's really interesting is that the research shows that when there's more of a kind of a positive mood state within a meeting, people tend to be more creative, more innovative. They listen more carefully to one another. They disagree more constructively with one another. So this idea of having a meeting that's kind of in this more positive energy, this positive mood state is very constructive for effectiveness. Interestingly, the best predictor of meeting mood state is actually the mood state of the leader. What that leader brings to the meeting is contagious. So if a meeting leader comes in there in a more positive way, expressing appreciation and gratitude, really respecting people's time, then they're able to kind of foster that positive mood state.
Yeah. A question about leadership. I've been involved in several meetings, and one of the elements of a meeting that I'm fond of is it starts with people talking about their successes and celebrating some of their wins. It may not get down to, and it's on the agenda, and it may not get down to the questions that you're looking for, but it does seem to create a positive attitude in terms of the expectation that the leader is setting and dispelling negative energy, because it starts with positive energy.
It certainly can. It's going to come down to how many people are in that meeting. People are gathering for a purpose, right? This is to get some stuff done. And so we just have to be careful with an exercise like that, is that it can take away from our primary purpose. It also starts creating this, potentially creating this environment where every meeting, someone is just looking for something to be celebrated. And so while I like that approach, I don't know if I necessarily would do it with every attendee. Perhaps we could rotate it or maybe collect them in advance. And that could be shared in a different way, and then some could be highlighted. But I just want meetings to have kind of a dynamic component to it. Mm-hmm. And so when a leader has too much of a similar formula meeting after meeting, people habituate to it and it just doesn't feel fresh. Mm. So recognizing people's accomplishments sounds wonderful, but let's make sure it's special.
Yeah. So you talked about the purpose of a meeting. I'm thinking that there are so many different purposes, right? Maybe one is used for problem solving. Maybe one is used to brainstorm a product launch, et cetera, right? I mean, people need to be clear on what the purpose of this meeting is designed for.
Yeah. In general, meetings have blended purposes. In our research, it's very hard to find meetings with a singular purpose. They always have multiple purposes. And, this is why I like the question-based approach to agendas. It really captures, kind of the goals of the meeting, the purposes of the meeting, and the questions could, span from task-related types of activities to more interpersonal related activities. But absolutely, we need to gather when there's a reason to gather. We need to gather when interaction is required. And if those things are not in place, then there are a variety of different communication tools that a leader can leverage.
Yeah. So in your research, you talk about it being evidence-based and practical and accessible, but based in science. And you looked at best practices from Google and Amazon. I'm curious, are there some examples of what Google and Amazon does that people could take into their practice here?
What I found in exploring many different organizations is that no organization is really doing this well. You can find leaders in those organizations who are doing meetings well, but I don't think any organization has really created a strong meeting ecosystem any large organization. Some of the smaller, moderate sized organizations that I've worked with, I feel actually have been able to change meeting behaviors and create a new ecosystem. But there's certainly things that leaders at Google and Amazon do that I like. There's probably a little bit more systemic practices around meetings at Amazon than any other company I know about. For example, it's very typical to not ask for people to prepare before a meeting in Amazon, instead actually build preparation time into the meeting itself. So the first 10 minutes or whatever makes sense, people actually do the prep in the meeting. I like that at times. It doesn't need to be done all the time, but at times that makes sense, right? If you're concerned that people don't have the opportunity to prep, build that in and let them do it so they don't fake it. Amazon also has interesting meeting practices around PowerPoint, so they're almost never done. Instead, if someone's making a pitch, it's actually done in writing, in a memo. And this is their way of preventing someone's charisma from shaping where people land in the meeting. So you put the ideas on paper. That's another interesting approach in meetings. Now, they invest highly in making sure everyone has writing skills to be able to do this effectively. But I like the thoughtfulness of thinking through how they would like their meetings to look and what problems are they looking to avoid.
Yeah. So meetings have changed a great deal in the wake of COVID or during COVID, right? We've gone from in-person only to Zoom only to now hybrid. Any thoughts about an effective way to sort of manage and merge these different ways of meeting given this new technology?
In many regards, we're in a heyday of meetings. As a meeting scientist, COVID has been very, very good to me, right? People have started to care about meetings in a way that they didn't prior to COVID. So it's been really exciting for me. I probably speak to a different organization each week about meetings. So things obviously have changed. We do have more meetings than we've ever had before. The meetings are a little shorter than we've had them before. On the positive, virtual meeting effectiveness is also higher than it's ever been before. People's skills for virtual meetings are actually leveling up. At the same time, a lot of these really amazing positives around virtual meetings are becoming better known. So for example, one thing that's wonderful about virtual meetings is it's a level playing field, right? We don't have head of table effects. Everyone is on the screen equally. Then we also have chat as an alternative communication vehicle, which is wonderful because, what we generally see is that those voices who tend to be more marginalized or maybe those individuals who have a little bit less status and power, they're more comfortable using chat. This is really positive, right? Because this promotes more inclusion and more involvement. So, you got this democratic setup, you got this chat function, then you have the integration of a whole host of collaboration tools that can be readily done via virtual meeting, be it, quick votes and polls to virtual whiteboards, breakouts. So, virtual meetings in many regards are poised to take meeting effectiveness to a level that we have not seen before.
what about hybrids? I know a lot of people who are doing hybrid meetings sometimes start multitasking when they're on screen and not in person.
So sadly, my early research on hybrid meetings is not looking too promising. Yeah. They appear to be receiving the lowest ratings of effectiveness. Those individuals who are attending remote just don't feel as included. And again, when you really think about it, those trends are not a surprise. To have a hybrid meeting, you have to be a phenomenal facilitator. Well, only 20% of leaders ever receive any training on how to run meetings. Facilitation skills are hard and challenging and have to be taught in a really dynamic way. So hybrid meetings depend on a leader being a good facilitator, and most are not. Furthermore, conference rooms really haven't evolved to allow for hybrid meetings to kind of have the same feel. And, we're just not there yet. There's been playing with different ideas. Microsoft is playing with people, like a hybrid person actually is their signal gets transmitted to a robot of sorts. The robot is a wheel with a pole and an iPad type thing, and that robot can move to the table. And so that person has a sense of presence around the table. Do I think that can really work? I'm not sure. I don't think that's ultimately going to be the solution, but I like the spirit of it, right? Trying to figure out how to literally bring someone in. So basically, we lack a lot of the skills to make hybrids work, and we lack a lot of the technology and space to really work.
So I want to talk a little bit about our audience, largely investment advisors and those in the financial services profession. They have meetings with their teams and staff. They have meetings with clients and prospects. They have meetings with their bosses. Sure. Can you talk a little bit about whether or not any of those meetings are different, and if so, how advisors might structure them?
What we've generally found is a meeting is a meeting is a meeting is a meeting. The ingredients that make a meeting work are relevant for almost any type of interaction. The underlying success factor is actually the concept of stewardship. Those leaders who are most effective at running meetings recognize that inherently they're a steward of others' time. Now if you really think about and digest those words, right? A steward of others' time, that's a big responsibility, because time is the gift that not only does everyone want more of, but when you give it to someone, that's very generous of you. When you recognize your role as a steward of others' time, then you're really motivated to make sure that people feel like they invested their time properly. The thought of people leaving your engagement saying that was a waste is so discomforting to you that you actually are planful, intentional, thoughtful. And this can take just a couple minutes of time, but at least you invest it. Now, interestingly, when you were listing your meeting types, people actually display stewardship all the time when they're meeting with important customers or key bosses, right? Because they would never want those people to leave the meeting saying it was a waste. But we tend to put those stewardship skills away when meeting with our peers or direct reports. So going back to how you started the question, I would say that think through how you run meetings with your key customers. Think about what you're channeling and thinking about and preparing, and take that and apply it to those other settings that perhaps aren't as high stakes.
Well, I promise to be a good steward of your time and only take 20 minutes to talk. Is there anything that we didn't cover or anything that you'd like to reemphasize before we wrap up?
Well, thank you. Yes, you were an excellent steward, by the way. Truly an excellent steward. No, I would just probably want to make sure people know about my website because
Yep.
I have a ton of resources available for folks, articles and videos. So if people could visit stephenrogelberg.com, I'm sure you'll have it in your show notes, but stephenrogelberg.com, and to take advantage of those resources. And feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help people answer questions around meetings. And then I'd probably end with this. While you can't control others' meetings, you do control your own. You could display stewardship, right? You could exemplify the types of meeting leadership behaviors that you hope everyone does. So make sure your house is in order. View each meeting as your opportunity to do your small part in truly solving the meeting's problem.
Steve, I can't tell you how grateful I am for the opportunity to chat with you and have you share your knowledge and wisdom with our listeners. It is so gratefully appreciated.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for reaching out, and good luck with everything. And I'll look forward to seeing this.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Advisor podcast, brought to you by the Investments and Wealth Institute. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe through iTunes, Spotify, or our website at www.investmentsandwealth.org/podcast to get the latest episodes of our Exceptional Advisor podcast series. For additional resources, updates on events, and exclusive membership deals, visit www.investmentsandwealth.org.